At this time, we're back. Eric DeSobe here, joined by my good friend David Radcliff. David, are you identifying yourself as a writer, an advocate these days? What's the best way to refer to you?
Both probably. I was always kind of initially uncomfortable with the advocacy label because I think it sort of boxes other people into how they see each other, but you can't really be disabled without being an advocate, unfortunately. So, yeah, increasingly more and more, a lot of things have to be sort of explicitly stated
Yeah,
for the benefit of others. So, yes,
yeah.
probably
Well,
both.
I'm glad you're on because I've learned a lot from you over the years, thinking about how in my regular job, recruiting teachers and people working in schools, how to think about equity in process is not just about demography, but also about is our process too ableist, or are we considering and missing out on really talented folks because the way our processes are structured or the jobs themselves are structured? What are you thinking about the most these days as it comes to making sure hiring practices are fair and inclusive to everyone that wants and should have jobs?
Well, I think, during we are still in COVID. People say post-COVID, pre-COVID, mid-COVID. We are seem to be eternally mid-COVID. But in the early days of the COVID pandemic or shortly thereafter, we started to see adjustments that were made for everyone that were previously asked for by disabled folks to make workplaces more equitable, but for various reasons that sometimes were not disclosed. People would say that wasn't a culture fit. And then suddenly it was a culture fit for everybody. And now we're seeing some of that being wound back. Friends of mine who are not disabled, who had grown accustomed to being able to work from home and be with their families and have a better work life balance and still get the same amount of work done, are now being asked to come drive across town to come into the office to do the same work. And for a lot of disabled people, including myself, that was sort of the unfortunately expected trajectory is like, we'll make adjustments for this one brief period and then we have to get back to business as usual, even if business as usual doesn't quite make as much sense. And so, yeah, that's on my mind a lot. And then also, obviously, conversations around AI, which I think technological advancements can both have benefits for disabled folks. Obviously, the wheelchair was an amazing technological advancement for my benefit, but also we are starting to see it sort of bleed into creativity and intellectual capital, which is an important aspect of disabled life. And so, we don't entirely want robots to do all the things that we can do.
Yeah. On the return to the office idea, I think I'm following that closely too, and I'm seeing, I guess most often, usually it's from CEOs who probably aren't working in the office at all, saying that the opportunities for collaboration or the mentorship or these things are what is really driving that decision. Do you buy that? Think it's fake, or is there some truth to that?
I think it's probably more complex than they would want to let on. I think that, first, just getting people to consider a pool that is not necessarily at their networking events is a challenge. And to consider, I think very often disabled people, it's assumed that disabled people are on benefits anyway, which is not always the case. I'm not myself, and so therefore they're taken care of, and it's sort of a charity model, which is unfortunate because there's a lot of grit and capability and ingenuity that is required just to be disabled in America. And so having that directed towards the benefit of a business or nonprofit seems to me like a no-brainer. But we still see that disabled people are twice as likely to be unemployed as temporarily non-disabled people. And that's a term that I use because everybody will spend on average 7 years of their life with a disability. So it's better to get comfortable with it in the workplace and elsewhere. And, I never grew up having a disabled teacher as a kid. And you may subconsciously internalize that. And then that feeds into your own hiring practices later. If you haven't seen disabled people in your workplace or in your networking events, then it becomes a self propagating cycle, I think.
Yeah, a lot of folks in my role, talent recruitment, thinking about how to bring people into the org or how to get people to stay there, can be advocates up the chain, whether it's to their bosses or the CEO, because they're oftentimes asked about, hey, what is the market showing, or like, what is the best way to get the best people or keep the best people? How would you want folks in positions like mine to advocate to have an open-minded and inclusive approach to where the work can be done, and how offices should be viewed?
I think there's two parts to what you said that are super important. One is that a lot of this is a fear-based situation. If you haven't seen it, then you're not really thinking of it. And I think people think of disability as like a medical issue, and so that makes business people concerned without the exposure to understand that that's not the case. And we already have a lot of our stuff figured out. We wouldn't be putting ourselves forward for a particular job if we weren't capable. But also, I think our resumes are going to look different because of some of the biases that we're discussing. So you can't really expect that someone would have necessarily a traditional looking, executive climb. However, disabled people, because of these reasons, are incredibly loyal. That was another thing that you just touched on, was loyalty. Are incredibly loyal to places that bring them in, because we know that a lot of places won't even consider us. It's interesting to me, like if I'm on Zoom and somebody just sees my face, they don't know what's going on. So that was another way that the COVID situation changed a lot of conversations. But we have to carry that forward into other environments beyond Zoom, so that comfort or exposure breeds familiarity, which when we were doing NLC together, that was an area where I felt like, well, I can bring some value here, because not solely for this reason, but my experience as a disabled person alongside other people from other underrepresented communities would naturally be a benefit. And I would learn a lot also because of better understanding, areas of my life that are easier for me than they are for others. So that's the kind of workplace I think more places should cultivate. But I also don't know, no one will ever be direct with me. And maybe that's a question for you too, as someone that is on the hiring side. No one's going to directly say, we're not considering this particular disabled candidate because we have concerns about the accessibility of our office, or we have concerns about whether he or she would be able to continually show up to work on time, or have like transportation needs or medical needs. No one's going to have those conversations because they know those are precarious areas. I almost wish that they would, because then you don't have so many opportunities to be gaslit in having like really positive conversations that lead to, we're going in a new direction. I find myself being very often a free resource for a lot of people who have developed conditions as a result of COVID, or their parents are getting older and like, what do I do about mom and dad at this point? Do you have any suggestions? If I charged a fee for, I'd be doing
You
quite
do quite
well.
well.
And I also work somewhat, I've written on some television shows, and I know in the entertainment industry, it's even more opaque, because you might have a job for a year, and then the showrunner decides to hire his friends instead the following season. So everything is very much up in the air. So at some level, I have grown accustomed to it, both as a function of being a creative person and a disabled person. But it's a very hard way to plan a future, as you get older. So we need more allies on the other side of the conversation to have conversations like this.
Yeah. So on the AI front, you talked about it from a disability advocacy angle, but the creative part that you mentioned, because you're in that creative world, what are the latest conversations on the creative side? Are you happy that the studios are suing OpenAI and other places trying to protect some of their IP? Are you a little too late? Like, what are your thoughts on where everything is right now?
Yeah, it's really so unknowable, and then there was the Writers Guild strike and the Screen Actors Guild strike a couple years ago. And one of the things that makes AI difficult to counteract is how quickly it moves. And so when one side of the table has a lot of information that the other side of the table doesn't, it makes it difficult to have even open conversations about what is to be expected. One of, like, just in a broad stroke, one of the concerns for the guilds was, or for the Writers Guild specifically, shrinking writers' rooms for television. So then you get down to only upper level writers, who are mostly well-established writers that have been around a while, hiring their friends. And what happens then is that the lower level writers don't have an opportunity to build the skills on set that they would need to then launch their own projects later. And also it has a knock-on effect for the sustainability of the guild itself, because everybody's paying into health insurance, and this is a union effort. Well, if you cut off a major percentage of those union members, then the future of that union is at risk as well. So yeah, it's a very complex problem. I think that AI I'm trying to learn more about it, but I'm also like resentful of it. Um, but my grandfather worked in coal and shale transportation, building conveyors. And so I watched him have a period of his career where both ageism and the shifting, environmental markets changed the nature of his business. And he was unwilling to adapt to green energy and was very suspicious of climate change as an idea. And so there's a part of me that wants to be educated enough on these things so that I can kind of grow into whatever's coming next. But I also think creativity is a specifically human endeavor that should not be, attempted to be duplicated by machinery.
Last thing, speaking of creativity, I was like hearing what you're watching and tuning into on TV or movies. What's the latest for you?
I mean, if I were being honest, I really very often revert back to like X-Files and Columbo.
Are you watching Poker Face? I feel like that's a modern day Columbo. Yeah.
I've only seen a few episodes. Maybe I'm too married to Columbo to
Andor.
enjoy it as much as I should. Although Elsbeth is also kind of Columbo-esque on CBS, and I do like that. I think Adolescence on Netflix was really awesome and sad. I really like Black Mirror, although we're living in such dystopic times in real life that sometimes watching it on TV feels like doubling down.
Watching the news.
But
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
Did you watch Andor?
I haven't seen Andor. No, I feel sometimes like with the huge franchise stuff that I don't have enough. It's similar to how I feel about the Marvel movies. I feel like if I miss a few, they're becoming more and more serialized. So I feel like I need to have prior reference. Although I am going to see Mission Impossible this weekend, and that's like the 8th movie. But I heard there's a lot of flashbacks in it.
Yeah, you'll get the whole thing covered in the first hour, so you're good to go.
Yeah.
Definitely check out Andor. Tony Gilroy is a great writer. The Star Wars lore is definitely tuned way down, which is nice.
Mm-hmm.
And especially the second season, if you get that far, is very much what LA is going through right now in terms
Wow.
of
Yeah.
an imperial provocation designed to have more provocation. So
Yeah.
I think you would dig
Yeah.
it.
I mean,
Interesting.
that's a whole other conversation about disability in the protest space. What are the best, and I haven't solved it myself, what are the best ways for us to be
Mhm.
contributory to a movement that is particularly physical sometimes and
There's a
maybe
lot
maybe
of
for
there's a lot of walking and marching. That is true.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Yeah, nice. Well, listen, David, how can folks find you? How can they read your advocacy or read your hot takes on AI? What's the best place to track you down?
I am on Twitter or X under my name, David Radcliff, no E on the end. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn in sort of a different
Capacity.
voice. So yeah,
Nice.
um,
Yeah,
yeah, I
we'll
should
make
be
sure to
easy
put
to
all
find.
that into the episode description, which full disclosure is written by AI. So maybe I'll run that by you, David. I think it's good to go. But appreciate you coming on. Appreciate everybody listening. Thanks for tuning in. You can catch us on YouTube. We're in 4K, looking great here. You can always listen to us, of course, in all the places you get your podcasts. So until next time, catch us.